Today we're jumping back to our NHL offseason plan series. We're now looking at the 24th ranked team for the NHL's regular season, the Detroit Red Wings. What will we expect from them this offseason as they continue on in the Yzer plan and see if they can come under this rebuild? What moves will they make? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the Detroit Red Wings and their offseason plan to get ready for the 23-24 NHL season. Of course, we're going on over 4 years of rebuilding with Steve Yzerman, very patient approach. I think it's fair to say they had a little bit of a disappointing year. I think the fans of the Red Wings would have liked to have seen them be a little closer to the playoffs, if not qualified. I mean, we've seen the Sabres and Senators both finish ahead of Detroit, and I think a lot of people might have thought Detroit might have been ahead of each of them at some point here in the last year, but even Yzerman himself said during near the end of season availability that he felt that Buffalo and Ottawa, were actually ahead of them in their building process. They were closer to being a playoff team than they were. I think actually he said that around the trade deadline after he wrapped up his move. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to recap the 22-23 season for the Red Wings, take a look at some key team stats, analyze their salary cap space, take a look at what moves we've already seen. What do they have for internal business going into the offseason, RFAs, UFAs, and then one of the top burning questions facing this franchise that they need to address during the summer. So first up, let's recap the 22-23 season here for Detroit. They finished with a record of 35, 37, and 10 for 80 points. So yes, a bit of an improvement, but still a bit behind Ottawa and Buffalo, which I think fair to say that most people would say is a little bit disappointing. They scored 240 goals, which was the 24th best in the league, allowing 279 against, which was 22nd in the league for a minus 39 goal differential. So obviously not great, still need lots of improvement there. Special teams were not fantastic either, but they're certainly going in the right direction. They're each edging their way up towards the top half of the league at least. The power play was 21.1%, which is actually pretty decent. A lot of teams, though, did finish ahead of them. They were 17th with that result. And on the penalty killing, which obviously still needs a little bit more work to get better. But again, it's inching towards being an average of 78.3% for 18th best. If you can get over 60th, then obviously you're in the first top half of the league, which is a little more respectable, but still they're really close. Lots of things that they can certainly be happy with for sure. Of course, it was the first season under new head coach Derek Lalonde. He'll come over after multiple seasons working as an assistant with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So obviously Steve Yzerman, very familiar with the Lightning organization after being there for a long time, left there to go to Detroit. So obviously the connection there continues on. He had a chance to work under John Cooper and work with the Lightning for some time. So obviously, I think he did a pretty good job in his first year, and they can continue to build on some things in that regard as well. And near the deadline, we did see Yzerman be quite active. They traded Oscar Sundqvist to Minnesota. They traded Jacob Vrana to St. Louis, traded Tyler Bertuzzi to Boston, and they traded Philip Hronek to the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, most of those deals, they ended up acquiring multiple draft picks in return. Of course, they also got captain Dylan Larkin signed to a long-term deal as well. And that was, debatable how that was going to happen. Lots of rumors, lots of speculation about the negotiation process, but they ended up settling on an 8-year deal at $8.7 million per season. So Dylan Larkin, who's played his entire career in Detroit and even dating back before that in the state of Michigan, obviously he'll be remaining there for the foreseeable future. So let's take a look now at their salary cap situation going into the offseason. They do have a lot of flexibility. They only have $52.8 million in salary cap that's already been used up and accounted for, which is a total of 15 NHL contracts, and they have $30.6 million available to them. That's assuming that we get a $1 million increase to $83.5 million, which is all that's guaranteed and expected right now. Things could change, but we're not expecting that. As we do these videos, we're basing it off of CapFriendly's.com's website, which is what they're basing it on, the $1 million increase. So with 15 contracts, you're looking at, anywhere from, 6 to 8 players that you need to replace on your roster. So let's take a look at the internal business that they need to take care of. So either RFAs that need to be taken care of or let go, or UFAs that either need to be retained or let go. On the RFA side, we've only got 3, a great deal of business here. They have Joe Veleno, Matt Luff and Gustav Lindstrom. Quite possible all three players may receive qualifying offers. Valino probably being the most important out of the three, but I can see scenarios where they at least extend a qualifying offer to Luff and Lindstrom. That's quite possible. On the UFA side, we've got Pius Suter, Adam Ernie, Alex Chason, who came on in the season late and actually didn't do too bad. Jordan Oshuli, defenseman Robert Hagg, goalie Magnus Hellberg, goalie Alex Nedeljkovic, and defenseman Mark Pysyk, who was out injured for quite some time here. So obviously they have some decisions to make, between the pipes for sure. Debatable how many of these UFAs are brought back, if any. There's a couple that I could see negotiating and staying, but I think for the most part, the bulk of them likely probably move on in free agency and are not brought back. Now let's take a look now at the top burning questions facing the Detroit Red Wings going into the offseason. And for me, question number one, and one of the most important, is what's going on with the goaltending. You have to figure out how to address goaltending on a longer-term basis. Clearly, they brought in Alex Nedeljkovic from Carolina a couple of years back. That scenario has not really worked out. Thankfully for them, he's on an expiring contract, so they're not, weighed down by any cap, issues because of it. They do have lots of flexibility to begin with, of course. Ville Husso, who they acquired a year before from St. Louis, still under contract, so he will be obviously their main goaltender moving forward. They do have Sebastian Cossa in the wings, but he's not ready for NHL duty as of yet. He was still splitting time between East Coast League and American Hockey League. I think long-term, he still projects to be the goalie of the future, but certainly has some things to work on and time to develop before they're ready to put him in that kind of position. I can see a scenario where they may be off trying to re-sign Magnus Hellberg. That's a possibility. Or they might go into the free agent market and try to find another veteran to come in and work with Ville Husso for the season. So that's a possibility. I don't know how they're going to go about things, but they certainly need to stabilize that position. I don't think Ville Husso was quite ready for a huge workload, so they better retain him, I think. They need to get consistent goaltending if they're going to have any chance at taking things up a notch towards the playoffs. Now, as we know, that Atlantic Division was pretty tough. Obviously, the Bruins had a historic season. You had the Leafs, Lightning, and Panthers, who are still going here in the playoffs. Obviously, for teams like Buffalo, Ottawa, Detroit, for two or three of those teams to have a chance to get in the playoffs, you need teams to fall back. You need to be able to pass them in the standings, and that's not going to be easy. Looking at the standings now, we thought maybe this year was a chance that maybe one of those teams got in, and they didn't. And really, the Florida Panthers got in with a little bit of luck, and now look what's happening with them. They're on the verge of winning a second-round series against the Leafs, where they currently hold a 3-0 series lead as I record this video. So, obviously, you get in the playoffs, anything can happen, but you need solid goaltending to do it, and that's a big question facing the Red Wings this offseason. Obviously, the 2023 draft's going to be another pivotal day. They have another top 10 pick. Didn't have any luck in the draft lottery, but still picking high enough that they're going to be able to get themselves an impact player. They obviously acquired a bunch of other draft capital as well through the trades them in at the deadline. I do have to wonder if Steve Yzerman considers using any of his draft capital to see if he can acquire a top young player. Like we've seen a couple of trades of the draft last year involving first-round picks, like the Kirby Dach trade, like the Alex DeBrincat trade, for example. Deals of that nature. Will Detroit and Steve Yzerman try to pull off one of those and bring in another top player to really emphasize things? We saw him go shopping a lot in free agency last year. This year's crop of free agents for him to really pick from, to me, is not anywhere near the level that's really going to be overly helpful. You might be able to get some depth players. I'm not saying they won't go into free agency, but they're not going to get players to play up higher in the lineup like they did with David Perron, Andrew Kopp, etc. That's going to be a little bit of a different story. So obviously the draft will be an important day for them, and an important decision is to be made what the best choice is to use those draft picks for. Obviously, Marco Kasper came over late in the season, but was dealing with an injury. So obviously his ability to get into the lineup next year and have an impact is also going to be something to watch as well. On the defensive side, they certainly need to add some more depth. I mean, they have Maurice Sider. They signed Ben Sherrod, doing a longer-term deal. Jake Wallman's proven to be a good pickup for them. They extended Olli Mata, so they're certainly going to need at least one more depth defenseman likely to come via trade or free agency. We expect Simon Edmondson to compete for a spot next year. So if you put Edmondson in the mix there, that gives you 5 defensemen. So you're going to need 1 or 2 depth pieces that you can look at, via free agency, for example, or if they pick up via trade. Philip Zadina's another player that we could see traded. He hasn't been moved as of yet, obviously, but he's 23 years old now. He's yet to be a full-time regular NHLer. He did battle a lot of injuries. At least when he has had a chance to play regular shifts, regular games, he hasn't really produced at the level you'd expect. He's put up 68 points in 190 games so far in his career, a career high of only 24 points. Whereas you look at players that were drafted around him are doing way better than that. So, it's been a while. We're now looking at 5 years after being drafted. I can see a scenario unfolding where Steve Yzerman decides to move on from a former first-round pick and, end up getting a first start for him. See if he can bring back another young player in a similar scenario that might benefit for a fresh start, and see if they can give that to him and get them going back at being successful. So obviously that's something we could see. And as I mentioned, a top 6 forward to try to replace the offense from Tyler Bertuzzi would be good after trading Bertuzzi and Verana. They didn't really bring in anything at the deadline that's going to give you those goals back or even anything more. So like I said, whether it be at the draft or what they do, I would expect Yzerman to be on the hunt for a top 6 forward. Will they go after a player like Alex DeBrincat if Ottawa makes it known that DeBrincat doesn't want to be signed there? Obviously, we know there's a juggling act that we don't know how that's going in Ottawa, but to me, I know DeBrincat to Detroit had been a rumor before because of the fact that he's from Michigan, and I'm sure at some point he wouldn't mind be open to playing there. But they are division rivals. The Sens are not going to give DeBrincat away at a lower price, considering his numbers were down a bit this year. But really, overall, he had a wonderful job with his assists. His playmaking was way better than I think a lot of people realized. And even though his goal totals were down, his assist numbers were up. So, at the end of the day, Alex DeBrincat is not going to come cheap. And I'm not sure that Yzerman's going to want to do that deal. I'm also not sure that Ottawa is going to want to trade DeBrincat to a division rival. But the biggest thing with DeBrincat too was around ownership. I think he wanted to wait and see how the ownership situation played out in Ottawa. And at this point, we don't quite know the answer to that yet, but there's all kinds of groups with deep pockets and celebrity influence here that are going to be a part of this. So to me, I don't really know that we have reason to suspect that he's going to want to leave Ottawa. So I'm not saying that that's a player they're going to target, but I know that was a name brought up before. But somebody along those lines, somebody who could be a top 6, 25 to 30 plus goal scorer, that's what Yzerman's certainly going to be looking to target if they can, but it's certainly not going to be easy. It's going to be really difficult, I think, for Detroit to take a big step forward next year. I mean, they have lots of flexibility, thankfully, between their cap situation. They have lots of draft picks. They should be wide open for business to be a team looking to make lots of moves. It's just questionable what they can get done. They can't rely on free agency, and trades for higher profile players obviously can be difficult, but we'll see what happens. But Yzerman certainly, I think, has his work cut out for him. But who do you think they should be targeting for a goaltender? Who's going to work with Ville Husso next year? Also, for a top 6 forward, who should they be targeting? They have the space, they have the draft currency, they have some young players that might interest other teams. Who should they go after and try to bring in to shore up that offense in the top 6? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Of course, plenty more videos to come in this series as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.